All right, we got a full house today. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. I'd like to call the meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. As a reminder, this meeting is being shared virtually through Zoom for those who couldn't make it and join us today in person, and is being recorded. Committee members, please remember to turn on your microphone before speaking so that those online and in the room can hear you, and please state your name, especially for those online, so they can kind of understand who's talking. I'd like to take a second and welcome our newest member, Heidi Files, with representing Kane County today. So welcome to the Transportation Committee, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We can go around the room and start introductions. I can start with myself. I'm Kevin Carrier, representing Lake County.
Richard Norwood, CMAP.
Mary Nichols, CDOT. Carabiner, CTA.
Jack Cruikshank, Illinois EPA.
Mark Kane, FTA.
Steve Schulke, IDOT Region 1.
Leon Rockingham, Mayor of the City of North Chicago, Council of Mayors.
Joseph Schofer, Northwestern University.
Karen Robles, Illinois Tollway.
Katie Bell, Cook County.
Steve Travia, DuPage County.
Lynette Civarella, Metro.
Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
John Paul Deepla, FHWA.
Chris Hebert, Sewer Pack.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA.
Tom Vanderwood, Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Amy Reinell, Active Transportation Alliance.
Audrey Wennick, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Christina Kupkowski, Will County DOT.
Heidi Files, Kane County.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kendall County.
Scott Hennings, McHenry County.
Megan Swanson, IDOT.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
All right, if we can go around the audience too. Doug's coming with the microphone. We'll do that real quick.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT.
Todd Schmidt, FHWA. Drew Duffin, McHenry County Council of Mayors.
Mike Clemens, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Leslie Roberts, South Suburban Mayors and Managers. Laura McFadden, Cook County.
Chad Riddle, IDOT, Local Roads.
Gretchen Clark, Kane Kendall, Council Mayors.
Joe Serdam, Lake County Council Mayors.
George Canethel, Kane Kendall Council of Mayors.
Laura Wilkerson, CMAP.
Russell Petrovic, CMAP.
Martin Menninger. CMAP.
Yamadab, CMAP.
Doug Ferguson, CMAP.
Alex Beata.
Kasha Hart.
Elizabeth Ginsburg.
Ryan Tomto.
Sarah Stolpe. Stephanie Pfeiffer, CMAP. Lindsay Bailey, CMAP.
Blanca Vella Schneider.
Vicky Barrett.
All right, thank you, everyone. We do have one quick order of business. Chuck Abraham with IDOT OIPI has requested to attend remote. He's got a qualifying reason today. So we'll need to go around to a vote to allow that. So if I can get a motion to allow Chuck to participate remote. Yep, got a motion. Awesome, Mayor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item 2.0 is agenda changes announcements. There are no agenda changes today. Do I have any announcements from any committee members? All right, seeing none, moving on to item 3, approval of the minutes. So we have before us the draft meeting minutes from our February 28th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as they're presented today? Amy, any second? Check. All those in favor? I should ask, is there any discussion or any questions, changes to the minutes? All right, now all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Amy is here today under item 4.0 to provide an update on the CMAP agency and board activities. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. Welcome to the April Transportation Committee meeting. Thank you all for attending today. I just want to echo our welcome to Heidi Files. She is KDOT's new Chief of Planning and Programming. And so we welcome you. Heidi, if you need any support from CMAP staff to better in your engagement and participation, please let us know. Okay. So I'm very happy to share some updates from CMAP as well as some notable milestones from across the region. First, the CMAP team recently joined state legislators at transit town halls hosted in Algonquin, Westmont, and Evanston. They presented the Plan of Action for Regional Transit, or PART, while the representatives and senators discussed transit reform legislation that's making its way through the State House in Springfield. Later, as you'll see in your agenda, Kasha will have more in her legislative update related to that topic. Then this week, CMAP Executive Director Aaron Alleman joined the groundbreaking ceremony for US Route 14, the grade separation project in Barrington. The project received over $75 million in federal surface transportation program funding, including support through the STP Shared Fund. This project was identified in CMAP's 2019 priority grade crossings list. So congratulations to Village of Barrington, the Northwest Council of Mayors, and to IDOT on this project. It's a great milestone here. Next, Director Alleman also recently joined our friends at the CTA for the Austin Green Line Station groundbreaking, where a reconstruction project will make the station fully accessible. It's one of many projects in progress under the All Stations Accessibility Program, ASAP, which is a real important step towards creating a fully accessible transit system for everyone in our region. CMAP was happy to play a supporting role by programming STP shared funds for that project back in 2023. Congratulations to CTA. Then, as you know, public input is an important part of our regional transportation planning process. So engagement efforts for the 2026 Regional Transportation Plan are also gearing up for the summer. The CMAP team will attend public events across our region to educate the public about the RTP and invite them to complete the questionnaire that we launched online earlier this year. Upcoming events include the Touch a Truck event in Woodstock, the Romeoville Park Party, a jobs fair hosted by the Chicago Public Library, and Fiestas Patrias in North Chicago, just to name a few. We will also have an update on the RTP, as you can see on your agenda, the RTP and the regional capital projects later in today's meeting. Next up is the Northeastern Illinois Development Database Web Map. We created this web-based tool for tracking significant developments and land use changes across our 7-county region. It's through this tool that municipalities can update the database with their proposed, in progress, and completed development projects to help us ensure accurate local land use and socioeconomic forecasting. This information strengthens CMAP's ability to analyze housing and land use trends, plan for future transportation and infrastructure investments, and support community development efforts. We got this web tool up and running a couple of weeks ago. My notes here say that we have as many as 59 additions to it. I actually heard yesterday more closer to 80 additions have already been entered into the system. If you're interested in this tool, please look it up on our homepage. It'll be available for you to look at there. Next up, Modernizing Illinois Sales Tax Report. A coalition of Illinois policy and civic leaders, including CMAP, released a report called Modernizing Illinois Sales Tax, Pathway for a Sustainable Future, which outlines how the General Assembly can enact sales tax reforms to secure a stronger fiscal future for Illinois. The report finds that if the state were to expand the tax base to services, it would create a fairer system and could generate nearly $2 billion annually in new state tax revenue. That would provide much needed financial stability for Illinois communities and support a better quality of life. And notably, it would also help address the transit fiscal cliff that our region is facing. On to other news. I do feel like a news reporter up here. As many of you are aware, CMAP opened a competitive call for projects this past fall for the CMAQ, STP shared and TAP funding programs. The project selection committees are recommending to program $290 million in federal funds to support 37 transportation projects across the region through 2030. The list of projects are now out for public comment. Following public comment, staff will gather those comments, compile them, and summarize them for you all. And that list of projects will come to this body for a vote at next month's meeting. So that's a bit of a look ahead there. And then finally, FLIP, our Future Leaders in Planning program. CMAP is accepting applications for this program. For those of you who are not familiar with this is a free summer program for high school students in our region who are interested in urban planning and shaping the future of the region. I can't say enough about this program only because I had to take a lot of twists and turns in my college time just to realize that there was such a program. So this is a nice way to get high school students sort of interested in urban planning and help us create a pipeline of talent in our region. Students from all 7 counties are encouraged to apply by June 2nd. The application is online on our website. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, Heidi.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry if you already kind of stated this, but I'm still relearning everything because we utilize obviously socioeconomic assumptions and projections from CMAP for our modeling, and we're going into some modeling updates in the near future. Your Northeastern Illinois Development Web Map tool, when municipalities are updating their approved or projected information, does that feed into the socioeconomic assumptions that you guys are revising and then eventually adopting?
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. That is the best way that we know what our existing conditions are, right? We can project a lot into the future, but if our starting point is not as indicative of what's really happening going on the ground, this is a tool to really sort of get a grassroots level understanding of what's going on in your communities and neighborhoods to make sure we have a good starting point for our forecast.
Okay, that's helpful. I will encourage our municipalities to go and see that then, because when we get your land use assumptions for our various modeling efforts, it's a lot more work for us to go in and have them review them. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Those are good updates. Now on to Russell for the weather and sports.
I'll start with the entertainment.
No, those are very good
Movie
updates. I know there's a lot of good
recommendations.
things going on in the region, so it's good to keep tabs on all that kind of stuff. So appreciate that. Moving on to item 5.01. Russell is with us today, and he'll provide an overview of the fiscal year 2023 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program amendments.
Okay.
Morning, Russell.
Included in your packet today is a memo detailing the 69 tip changes contained in formal tip amendment 25-06 and the 227 tip changes contained in administrative amendments 25-06.1 and 25-06.2. As seen in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of just over 1.5 billion in total costs for all prior, current, and future years. Here are a few highlights. CMAP has been working with the CREATE team to update the CREATE projects in the TIP. CREATE projects have recently been recipients of mega and infra grants totaling nearly $360 million in federal funds. These projects also have significant contributions from the railroads, IDOT, and local governments, Metro Cook County specifically. The 3 CREATE projects on the formal TIP amendment added $1.2 billion in total cost and $727 million in federal funds. Also, they have significant other federal fund contributions, such as the National Highway Freight Funds, and they also have funds from FRA, the CRISI funds. IDOT added about $165 million for work on I-80. That is primarily on the I-80 bridge going over the Des Plaines River, and also on some of the interchanges that are associated with that area. IDOT also added a new project to replace the bridges on I-55 at Illinois 50, otherwise known as Cicero Avenue. For that project, they added about $57 million. And like I said, that's just for bridge replacements. So between the CREATE projects and the 2 IDOT projects, that's about 95% of our tip changes in terms of cost. Administrative amendments increased cost by $940.2 million in the tip in all prior, current, and future years, as the tollway added some of their new projects from their new capital plan to replace bridges on I-294 and to improve some of the toll plaza and do work in that area. The net change for total costs in the tip from all amendments resulted in just over $2.441 billion being added to the tip in prior, current, and future years. As shown in the memo, cost changes comprise most of the formal changes, while administrative amendments were primarily AC and ACC related and/or schedule changes. Accounting for the amendments presented to you today, the tip remains physically constrained. The amendments, along with the memo, were posted on April 18th for committee and public review. In addition to the tip amendments that are included in your packet, I do want to note that we released the conformity amendment on Wednesday for public comment. The conformity amendment will come back to this committee at the next meeting for a recommendation to the MPO. But I just want to let you know that that is out there now. We just did that. For today, though, we are asking for approval of formal tip amendment 25-06. And after the motion has been made, I can answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Russell. I'll entertain a motion to approve formal tip amendment 25-06.
So moved, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Second. Thank you, Heidi. All right. Any questions or discussion items for Russell today? Yes, Audrey.
Yes, hi. Regarding the CREATE increase of over $1 billion, I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about the reasons that it's gone up so much.
Absolutely. I will tell you the reasons. But first, I believe we do have a representative from OIPI on the call. I'll give him first crack if we want to unmute Chuck. I think Chuck could speak to this. And if he isn't able to answer that, then I will fill in based on what I know.
Hi, everyone. Felicia Good will speak for us. She's in charge of the CREATE program.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So our updates are largely due to inflation and also due to a lot of the dates that we entered previously come from around 2020, and we're updating to 2025. So inflation has a lot to do with that. And then in addition to that, some of our projects were bridge rehab projects, and now they've graduated to bridge replacement projects. So that has affected a lot of the numbers. At least two of our projects are affected by that. Beyond that too, looking at my notes here. So we have segmented some of our projects. Some of the updates are due to awards that we've received from either the MPDG or from CRISI grants, and that increased the value on some of the columns. And also on several of them, we were completing the phase 2 design engineering and had to get new bids or update the construction estimates, and that had a large effect on the totals.
Is that sufficient? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, that was good. Thank you, Chuck and Felicia. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other questions or discussion items? All right. We got a motion, a second. So all those, I guess all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And Russell, you're sticking with us here. So
yeah, you're not getting rid of me so
No.
fast this time. No, I got the next item too.
Russell's going to provide an overview of the federal fiscal year 2025 FTA sub-area partial allocation between Illinois and our neighboring states here in the region.
Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. There was a memo that was contained in your packet that has the funding splits. What's unique about this one, though, is that this is a partial FTA funding split. The full year's apportionments have not been released yet. So once those are, we will probably have to come back here, or we'll have to do it at one of the MPO meetings. But just so folks are aware, we normally do this once a year for the full apportionment. We do want to get some of this money flowing, and so we're doing the partials right now, but we will likely come back at some point either to this committee or to the MPO for the full apportionments once they're released. As stated in the memo, at its March 27th, 2025 meeting, the RTA board approved the funding splits for FFY 25 for 50 FTA section 5307/5340, 5337, 5339, and section 53 I can't speak right now. Section 5310 funding with Northwest Indiana and Southeastern Wisconsin, as presented in the memo. So basically what happens is the funds come to the urbanized area and then they get split amongst the three urbanized areas, with the Wisconsin part going to Wisconsin, the Indiana part going to Indiana, and then all the Illinois part staying within Illinois. Staff requests approval recommending the sub-area partial allocations between Northwest Indiana and Northeastern Illinois and Southeastern Wisconsin and Northeastern Illinois to the MPO Policy Committee for consideration. And if there are any questions after the motion has been made, I can answer those.
All right, I will entertain a motion to approve recommending the fiscal year 25 FTA sub-area allocation to the MPO Policy Committee for their consideration. Lynette, I think was first, second Jack. All right, any questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thanks, Russell. Appreciate it.
Now for the weather.
How are the Cubs looking the rest of the weekend here? Moving on to item 6 on our agenda is going to be informational items. So we'll have a couple updates here. First one, item 6.01 is update on the regional transportation plan. Got Ryan, Martin, and Elizabeth here today. And give us an overview on the RCP evaluation as well as some of the financial plan items. So good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Again, my name is Ryan Tomto, Principal Policy Analyst here at CMAP. I use he, him pronouns. We have a big update.
Sorry, Ryan, could
sorry.
you bring that up a little? Yeah.
No matter how close.
You're too tall.
Here we go. Thanks, sorry about that. Yeah, so we have a big update, lots of updates actually. So I'm only gonna be up here for a couple of minutes providing a high level overview, but then I'm joined today with Martin Manager, who's gonna be providing updates on regional capital projects, and then Elizabeth Ginsburg, who will be providing updates on the financial planning work underway. So on the next slide, work continues on pretty much every stream of work under the RTP suite of projects. We came last time with the update on the emerging priorities report that was released that provided us with kind of those high level goals and objectives that we're looking at in the plan. This is helping us to refine and finalize our existing conditions report, which we'll be coming back to this committee with at your next meeting in May. Additionally, engagement activities are ramping up quite a bit. Again, we've been having those ongoing meetings with stakeholders and other partners over the past year, but we're really ramping up the general public outreach components of the work. As Amy messaged or included earlier in her update, we have a lot of activities coming up that we're booking. And so looking forward to be out in the region, meeting with people and hearing their stories and how they're experiencing the transportation system. And I think on the next slide, I just want to remind everybody, we do have that engagement HQ website up. There you'll find an informational video about what the RTP is all about. There's the questionnaire that we released. We have over 750 responses to that so far and counting. So really exciting. It's exceeding our expectations of how quickly we'd be receiving submissions there. And then additionally, just want to point out that there is that memo submission form or portal. This is really just a space if folks have research or ideas or anything that they want to submit to us in a format other than completing the survey. This is a great opportunity to submit it through that portal. And with that, I will hand it over to Martin Manager, who will walk us through RCP evaluation criteria.
Morning. So I know many of you are part of our regional capital project working group. If you want to go to the next slide, we're in a bit of a transitional point in the evaluation of projects. We're wrapping up our call for projects and the development of criteria. I'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute. We're moving into the evaluation phase of this project. We have met with the resource group several times to talk about how the process will go. We've got 2 more check-ins with them over the summer, and then we'll be coming back to this group in the fall to sort of bring you the results of that evaluation. Next slide. So we have received 158 proposed projects. We're sorting through those right now. That might not be the final number that we bring to you in the fall. About half of them are transit and half of them are on the roadway side. We found that many of the projects, particularly the arterial add lanes that were submitted, are already in the TIP, but weren't considered RCPs in the past because we lowered that threshold for capacity projects. But a good mix of new and old projects. More than a third already were RCPs in the last evaluation. Next slide. Thank you for all of you that have submitted those. So where we're at right now, we've got the information from you and we're sort of sorting through it. We know that many of the projects, most of the project will be evaluated. Some of them, if they are fully funded, they've been evaluated in many of our past plans, and now they're at the point where they're ready to begin construction or already under construction. We consider those committed projects and don't evaluate them in the same way that we do other projects. Those are included in our baseline forecasting, and so have a lighter touch to them, but are still considered part of the regional capital projects. And then this year, something new we're working on, and we've done it in different flavors before. We're calling it program priority areas. These are projects that don't necessarily fit the mold of an RCP with specific locations and things like that. But we want to have the same level of focus and prioritization of them. Things like accessibility improvements, ITS, transit electrification. These don't have specific locations or things that we can model necessarily, but we want to carve out space in the plan and the financial plan to make sure they're not lost in the shuffle. So that's an area we're working through. Potentially some of the projects submitted could fall into that bucket. We're figuring that out. Next slide. So we are finalizing, we went through the evaluation criteria with our resource group and are finalizing that as we begin the evaluation. We have fewer criteria than we have in the past. We did an analysis that showed a lot of the measures we had correlated with each other, and we're really representing the same thing and just kind of a factor. So we've cut this list down. It's still a little long. If you'll bear with me, I'm gonna go through a few of these. We've grouped it into 2 categories. Existing needs really represents the system as it is today, and future impacts really reflect our modeling results that we do in 2050, comparing the baseline with and without the project in it. The first 3 existing needs look at asset conditions, safety, and congestion reliability. On the roadway side, these are relatively similar to what we've done in the past. We're bringing in IDOT safety tiers that make our safety measure a little more predictive. On the transit side for these 3 measures, we're working with the RTA to bring in their capital project evaluation measures to sort of align those 2 processes a little more closely. The next 2, freight and pedestrian and bike accessibility, these really look at our critical links in that network for those users being impacted. And then the last 2 on this list look at who is using the link or the project area. Not just is the project located within a certain community, but who are the users of it. We use travel model schemes to think about that for our economic priority and our sort of land use priority areas. Moving over to future impact. 4 of these look at travel time change for all roadway users. transit users, economically disconnected areas, and freight users. We're thinking about how are their travel times improving. We are also looking at congestion for the roadway ones. So roadway, the economically disconnected, and the freight. On the transit side, we're looking at the ridership impact. And then the final group there is emissions. We're looking at greenhouse gases and our criteria pollutants, PM 2.5, VOCs, and NOx, and understanding how the projects impact each of those measures. So that was a lot. Once we collect all this data, we'll put it in a report, but we are also factoring in things like cost and sponsor support as we go through our evaluation and having discussions with you before we bring a proposed constraint list to you in the fall. So with that, sure, Amy?
Thanks, Martin. I'm just wondering if you could describe a little bit about how these are weighted relative to one another.
Yeah, so we're still working through that. I think we'll work through that with the resource group over the summer. We have a tool that can help us weight them against each other, but that might not necessarily be one way to weight them. We can maybe weight them one way and think about it, and then change the weighting and think about it a different way. So we know we want to have safety projects, and we need to have state of good repair projects. And so maybe the best projects from each of those areas come to the top with different types of weightings. We're still working out exactly how that will come together. Any other questions before I hand it over to Elizabeth?
I'm just, maybe not question, but comment, just building off of what Amy asked. Really eager, I know we're staffing the working group as well to kind of think about those scenarios of weightings and, you know, consider how certain criteria play off of each other. I know that some of those criteria end up becoming a challenge for funding large transit projects, and those are all the valid and right ones we should be looking at, but that's scenario modeling and doing the feedback with staff. We're really eager to participate, and so thanks for including us in the process.
Thank you.
Martin, sorry, my bad. I had a quick question. You may have said this already too, but I know part of the kind of redefining the RCPs was to, and correct me if I'm wrong, kind of capture maybe more projects and take credit for, you know, benefits and stuff like that they're providing. So was there a comparison? I'm just kind of curious, you know, how many projects in past plans versus this one? Did we, you know, do we feel like, you know, how do we feel about the categories and stuff right now for the RCPs?
So it was noted, I think 63 of the 158 are, 61 are repeats from in the past. But like I said, a lot of the newer projects are already in the tip, so they're not new to us or new to modeling. They're just sort of new to this process. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, that was good. I think just whenever you change something like that, you kind of want to know, like, you know, how do we feel about it? Does it feel good right now? And
yeah, it feels like the right mix of projects, and we're capturing some projects that are a little more aspirational, and some that, you know, are ready to get built tomorrow. And so I think we've got a good mix of thinking about what the future could look like and sort of stretching ourselves a little, but also some realistic. So I'm happy with that, but
good.
I don't know.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
Now for the fun part. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Ginsburg. I'm a senior policy analyst with RPI, and my pronouns are she, her. If you could go to the next slide. I'm here this morning to give you all an overview of the draft baseline revenue forecast. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind everyone that the financial plan is a required component of the RTP. And we're specifically required to show that we have sufficient funding to cover all of the costs that are ultimately included in the plan. And this really gives us a way to understand and plan, think about the relationships between the revenues that we have available, the goals that we're including in the plan, and the projects that we ultimately want to move forward. Next slide. The baseline revenue forecast is essentially the first step in the financial planning process, and it involves developing projections for each of the individual revenue streams that exist today to support the transportation system. As you will see in the following slides, there's generally some good news for many of the individual funding streams, but it's important to remember that baseline revenues have typically been insufficient to cover all of the costs that we've included in the plan. New durable funding sources will ultimately need to be added to the pile in order to make sure that we can pay for everything we identify. This process gives us a way to build consensus around what those revenues should be and also what those costs should be. While we're primarily talking about the revenues today, future phases of the work will be important for building out the other pieces of the puzzle. Before we dig too far into the numbers, next slide, I did want to take a moment to talk about how we got here today. A lot of the work underpinning the revenue forecast lies in the assumptions and the methodologies that we're using to develop the estimates. And this work will be ongoing. As I said, this is a draft. I've been saying internally, draft of the draft. We're still really working on it. Based on the feedback we've already received from our resource group and from individual meetings, we're continuing to think about what some of those assumptions are and how we can best capture the path forward. And our goal is to really feel confident in the fiscal constraint that is ultimately identified at the end of the financial planning process. This means that we don't want to overly bloat the revenues. We want to make sure that everything we're assuming will happen so that we can, as I said before, pay for everything that's in the plan. But it also means not being overly conservative so that we aren't kind of underpinning our own ability to be optimistic and innovative moving forward. Next slide. The baseline revenues are typically organized into 4 categories. Shown here, that's federal revenues, state revenues, locally generated revenues, and system generated revenues. Federal revenues include all of the formula funding that comes to the state and the region, as well. So that's both formula funds from the Federal Highway Administration and the FTA, and also the competitive funding that is awarded to the region. State revenues include the state motor fuel tax and the sales tax on motor fuel. The user fee revenues, so things like vehicle registrations and title fees. There's the state's public transportation fund and the state's capital programming. For local revenues, the primary funding source is the RTA sales tax. And then there's also the portion of the Chicago real estate transfer tax that is dedicated to the transit system. Many of our counties have their own motor fuel tax. And then we also account for local municipal and township revenues that are used to pay for local, municipal, and township capital costs. System-generated revenues, last but not least, include our transit fares and other transit operating revenues, and then tolls and other tollway operating revenues. You can flip to the next slide. It mostly looks the same, but we're still working on 2 of these pieces. Oh, can you go back? I grayed out a couple just to tell you all, we're still working on the competitive funding piece of the federal revenue forecast. Obviously, so IJA provided a lot of competitive funding, and even before the inauguration, there was questions of how reasonable it is that that level of competitive funding how much competitive funding there would be moving forward. So we're going to kind of sit on that and wait it out and see until there's more clarity. We're also still working on the local municipal and township revenue forecasts. We have a lot of municipalities and townships, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. All right, now next slide. So that being said, the baseline revenue forecast in the Onto 2050 plan update was $488 billion. If we take out those 2 pieces that we're still working on, we're looking at around $403 billion for the previous plan horizon, which was 2023 to 2050, and so 28 years. Today, our baseline revenue forecast is $355 billion for our new plan horizon, which is 4 years shorter, so 2027 to 2050. If you jump to the next slide, although this seems like less money, we're actually projecting more revenue on an annual basis over the planning period. So instead of about $14.5 billion annually, we're now projecting an average of nearly $16 billion. The next few slides, I'm going to dive into each of these buckets a bit more, and then we can have discussion after that. When we think about local revenues, as I said before, the primary funding source is the RTA sales tax. And revenues from the sales tax have been performing pretty well in recent years. Between 2021 and 2023, revenues were actually 15% higher than we had previously forecasted that they would be. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Largely the kind of economic trends and spending activity that occurred over the pandemic. We saw a lot more sales tax revenue kind of across the board. And there's also been some policy changes that have strengthened the existing sales tax on goods as a revenue stream, namely the Level the Playing Field Act, which collected sales taxes from remote transactions that previously did not collect those revenues. This year, the Re-Level the Playing Field Act became effective, and we're again, April was the first month that we're seeing revenues coming in from that, and they are again higher than we would have expected. So we feel pretty good about this revenue forecast, but we'll continue to kind of keep an eye on things moving forward. Combined, the Chicago RET and the county MFTs are only about 1% of the total forecast and about 6% of the local forecast. They're both projected to be slightly higher than they were before, but in the grand scheme of things, they're about the same. Next slide. The state's public transportation fund is a direct match of the RTA sales tax and the Chicago RET revenues. So that's a 30% match, and we see the same kind of higher than we previously expected trend there. But the two main funding sources at the state level are the state MFT and the vehicle user fees. The state MFT is projected to be higher than it was previously, and that's largely because the previous projections about the uptake of more fuel efficient vehicles, we're seeing that that actually isn't as happening as quickly as we thought it would. So in the near term, we're seeing more motor fuel tax revenue from more people buying more gallons of gas. On the user fee side, there are actually some reductions in the projection, and this is largely attributed to recent declines in the number of vehicle registrations and also the regional population forecast, which is about 1 million people less in 2050 than it was the last time around. Next slide. For federal revenues, we're looking at about the same amount of funding over the planning period as was previously forecast. This is in part due to the new revenues that came through the bipartisan infrastructure law, which drastically increased the federal highway funding or formula funding that makes its way to the state and then to Northeastern Illinois. The bipartisan infrastructure law also added an annual inflator to its funding programs, 2%, and that previously didn't exist. So we can feel really confident in the annual inflation assumption there. The other formula funds, so the federal highway funding that gets sent directly to our region, and also the Federal Transportation Authority funds, we're projecting slightly less growth than they had before, but it's still year over year increases across the planning period. And then next slide. The system generated revenues, again, this includes both our toll system and our transit system. So the tollway total is approximately 5% greater than it was in the last forecast. And these projections are largely based on the information shared by the tollway. And CMAP also assumes a couple increases to the passenger tolls over the planning period. On the other hand, with the transit fare forecast, given the current moment in time with the fiscal cliff, we've tried to be extra attentive to how we handled forecasting the future of the transit fare funding. We know that fares exist in relationship to the revenues that are available to support the system, to the levels of service that's being provided and the costs of that service. And so we've built out a model that tries to take all of these things into account. And we're currently assuming that the fiscal cliff is filled, but the additional funding beyond that is not provided as kind of a middle path forward. And with that, we're assuming about 40% less transit fare revenue over the planned horizon. We will continue to kind of keep our eye on that situation, as I'm sure you all will, and we'll make updates as needed. And with that, I'm going on, we can jump to the discussion slide and open it up for questions.
All right. Any questions or discussion items for Elizabeth? Yes, Scott.
So I'm on the work group, so I should know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. The RTA sales tax that the counties receive, how are you treating that anticipated revenue going forward? Because I know each of us spend a different percentage of that total allotment. How are you handling that?
Yeah, that's the Collier County Empowerment Fund. We include those dollars in the total RTA sales tax dollars and assume that the counties are using them for transportation purposes.
So just to clarify, so you're assuming we spend 100% of that RTA sales tax on transportation?
Right now, this is something that has come up as maybe we want, because the funds are eligible for both transportation and public safety costs. So we might wanna, as we work with all of you and have individual conversations, maybe we can better understand if instead of 100%, we want to assume 80% or even 50%.
My last comment. So that's a big thing, because for us at least, that's the biggest percentage of our funding we get is from RTA sales tax. So assuming that 100% of that is used for transportation for the next 25 years, when the reality might be significantly less than that. So it's a big ticket dollar amount. Just want to draw attention to that.
Yeah,
Also, another comment, I believe, and DuPage can speak to this, but I believe DuPage, for instance, uses 100% for public safety and none for transportation. That's a big dollar amount. And I don't see that changing.
There is this, for instance, we know that Cook County uses their funds for public safety costs associated with the transportation system. So with the lockbox, there is some like different interpretations of what that could look like. But thank you all for raising this. It's something I've been wanting to look into. So we'll make sure we do.
I have a question that kind of piggybacks on that. So if any of those changes do happen, we realize you have to make kind of a, determination at a certain point as a snapshot in time. But if something like that changes, or if, like to your point, the fiscal cliff, you're assuming the fiscal cliff is met, if that ends up getting exceeded, like if there's changes like that, is there opportunities to go back and like, how's the plan modified at that point? Or what's the process? Is there a process for that? Just kind of curious. And I apologize too. I may have asked this question before, to be honest with you, and I forgot, but.
You all are like in the walls, I swear. We've been talking internally about what the plan amendment process might look like, and we're hoping to kind of bring proposals to you all about with that soon. I think in general, when it comes to the financial or the fiscal constraint, if there's like a project that's going to have significantly more costs, we want to make sure we understand how that impacts the constraint. And then if there's significant changes in revenue sources, we'll want to understand that. And part of it will just be figuring out like what that definition for significant looks like. I think on the fiscal cliff side, like if no solution is ever resolved, we'll definitely want to make sure that we are capturing that as we're moving forward. It is an operating side of things, so it's slightly different than if a new project were to come along or a project were to drop off.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I did just catch myself there. Just a reminder to everyone, if we can state our name and before we make comments and stuff like that too. I apologize for those online. Anybody else? Questions or comments?
Amy CMAP. So I can feel it in the room, right? There's going to be some really tough discussions coming up here with all the projects that were submitted for the RCPs, as well as this sort of uncertainty around what is our financial future. And so I think what this kind of undergirds is a need, again, to think about new funding sources in the sales tax reform that that was in my updates. So to the extent that we're trying to get ourselves closer to an understanding of what are those uncertainties that we need to sort of create a path for or a safety net for on those projects, that's the real discussion that we hope to be getting towards later this year.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And I was going to say too, I mean, I don't envy you guys. I'm glad we got a lot of smart staff here because just there's so much going on out there and change, and just being able to kind of track that and implement that with a regional plan is great. So seeing nothing else, do you guys have anything more to close out, or
I have one more slide.
you have some more slides? Okay, awesome.
So just in terms of what are the next steps, as I mentioned, we're going to continue to refine the baseline revenue forecasts, especially as those last couple pieces come in and some assumptions get changed, things might move around. We're also getting started in earnest on developing the cost estimates. So this is everything to operate and maintain the system in its existing condition, everything to improve and modernize the system to meet the plan's targets, and then everything to kind of enhance the system to meet regional goals. So making it more accessible, easier to move throughout the system. And then as Amy mentioned, really identifying what those reasonably expected revenues will be, and that we as a region can build consensus around so that they are actually implemented over the planning period. And then we're also going to be doing some risk assessment work, which is really thinking about how using different categories, we obviously are familiar with the federal, state, local structure, but how do the revenues that we have for transit capital align with our transit capital needs? How do our operating revenues align with our operating needs? And then also what happens if any of these reasonably expected revenues don't appear? And we'll be bringing you all along on that journey. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Amy, Active Transportation Lands. On the revenue forecast, do you do a range of scenarios? I'm just thinking about like if we hit a recessionary point soon, that's going to affect sales tax. And the federal funding picture is very uncertain. So I'm just wondering within that forecast if there's going to be a range of either confidence or levels.
We haven't typically structured the final numbers in that way, but we do try to think through those scenarios when we're setting the assumptions and the methodology. But also this is a long-term forecast. So many of those kinds of ups and downs with things like inflation tend to kind of even out over the long term. And then things like capital funding or from the federal government and even the state, we found that once it's increased, it kind of at least stays at that level. So there's in the past has been little risk of money going away, but that is part of what we hope to cover with the risk assessment as well.
Awesome. Anybody else? All right, you guys,
Thank you.
is that the end? Awesome, thank you very much, appreciate it. Elizabeth, Martin, and Ryan. I see Lindsay working her way towards the podium. She's going to be item 6.02. She's going to be providing an update on where things are at with the Safe Streets for All program of work. Good morning, Lindsay.
I don't know how to get this down, so just try and angle the microphone. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Laura. Oh, there's the thing. There's a little instructions.
Put it where you want it.
Okay, thank you. To follow on the theme of responding to changes that are outside of our control, I wanted to give you all an update on Safe Travel for All. This is our work to develop safety action plans for Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, and Will counties using our SS4A federal grant. Next slide. I'm going to go through a little bit of the components that are required of a safety action plan from when we signed on to the grant and to what they are now, give you an update on the status of the plans, and talk about You've all probably heard little whisperings of what we're doing for the official approval of the technical plans, and then what our next steps will be after that date. Okay, next slide. So we have been following, there was a recent notice of funding opportunity announced, so we compared what the requirements are for safety action plans today to what they were. And one of those components was the equity analysis. And so when we heard the executive orders coming out, we took a very cautionary pause on the work and made sure that we worked with our partners at Federal Highway to ensure that we were complying with the law and how the grant would be operating moving forward. We are not removing the equity analysis that has been completed, but we're shifting to the ways that the government are perceiving equity or underserved areas now. When we have a safety action plan, there are, at this point, 8 required components. There are 8 components to a safety action plan. 3 of them are required, and then you must have 3 of the optional ones at the time of plan adoption. And you can see the required ones shown in yellow and the optional ones in white, but they all have to be done eventually. It's just for that plan adoption, you need those. So next slide. Okay, I guess not all of the slides are, okay, yes, can you click once more? Initially, we defined equity with the regional framework document using Justice 40 CGIST census tracts that were identified as disadvantaged. And the new NOFO guidance shows tracts with somewhat older data, and they're calling it areas of persistent poverty. But you can see across the region, they line up pretty well. Sorry, McHenry County, you don't have any more underserved areas. And DuPage also has a big change. But generally, for Cook County, we see a very similar overlay. And so we are glad to see that that is still in there, because we have found that these areas of persistent poverty are where we have higher rates of fatal crashes and serious injury crashes. Next slide. As I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we were complying with all the federal regulations. So when we took a look at our big scope and broad grand plans that we had to suspend some of the elements, and all of our public engagement was based on Justice 40, which was off the table. And so we did not get to do the level of public engagement that we really wanted to do. We did have engagement happening at all the counties, but our engagement consultant was going to put together a toolkit for municipalities and other units of government to use to do better engagement. They were going to put together a toolkit to identify appropriate strategies and countermeasures at the local level. And we wanted more detail and nuanced recommendations. The consultants are all doing systemic analyses, but I think if they could have had more time, and I'll get into the timeline in a second, they would have done a more enhanced version. Our emphasis area reports, a lot of those are coming in, but they are not a required element of the technical plan. So there is a lower emphasis on completing that in time for the term of the grant. And finally, we had a partnership with Metra where we established that we would look at rail grade crossing safety and do some prioritization of where we can focus on those improvements that will help improve rail safety. There are a lot of rail safety elements within all of the plans, but we think we could have done more with that. Next slide. Okay, so now I'll give you an update on the status, and I mentioned the timeline. The original terms of our grant did say that we were to be done on June 5th, but we had a built-in 6-month leeway, and we were advised to maybe not consider that as flexible as we had initially thought it to be. And with a clawback amendment to not turning in deliverables by a certain date, we wanted to be on the safe side and protect CMAP from the federal government coming and saying we owe them $4 million. So we're going to make sure that we get these plans done and include all of the required components for this technical safety action plan. And the timeline we established, all of them have completed their existing safety conditions and their countermeasures and policy recommendations. And we will be seeing a lot more of the documents coming through in the next couple of weeks. And we will have the final plans wrapped up by May 23rd, which is just in time to be included in the Transportation Committee packet prior to your meeting on the 30th. Next slide. So that brings me to the approval of the technical plan. We worked with Federal Highway to try and identify that Transportation Committee would be the official approving body, but they really wanted it to be the MPO Policy Committee. And so we recognized that the next MPO policy meeting was not going to be until after the grant deadline. So we had to call a special MPO Policy Committee meeting. Recognizing that many of you on this committee serve as alternates for your respective agencies to the MPO Policy Committee, we thought it would be convenient if for this very short meeting for approval, we could have that happen immediately following the next Transportation Committee meeting. So thank you all very much for your flexibility in understanding these timeline changes. But there is the silver lining to this with the NOFO coming out. The deadline for applying for the next round of SS4A funding is June 26th, and our plans will be done on the 5th, which will make municipalities and counties in the region who have a safety action plan eligible to apply for implementation funding or for planning and demonstration grants. We're particularly interested in the demonstration projects because those can be pretty significant and important, and there is, I think, more funding in that area. Next. And then, so the plans officially wrap up with the federal funding on June 5th. We hope to continue our work on many of those elements that we suspended using whatever funding sources we can identify. And then we will be working through, once we wrap this up, we will work through what those priorities are and how we can continue on some of these elements that were suspended, but we recognize are very important. And so we look forward to that after June 5th. That is all I have.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll just say real quick too, I'll get into the questions in a second, but we met with Jules and the consultant team and started kind of looking at some of these drafts too. And while there's some changes, like Lindsay alluded to, there's a lot of good stuff in it. Projects on our end, intersection improvements, corridor improvements, pedestrian locations identified, and then some policy and countywide things too. So I know you guys had to expedite some stuff. We're going to have to get through a lot of reviews and things like that to meet the timeline, but it does look like it's, there's a lot of good things in the plans too. So I just wanted to say that up front.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, questions, Kyle.
Yeah, kind of building off that, I just wanted to say thank you to CMAP staff and the counties and municipalities and the consultants who are working through this. I mean, this committee has discussed ad nauseum how much traffic safety is and should continue to be a priority for the region. So it would be a real shame if we couldn't move these plans and couldn't apply for funding. So I know it's been a difficult several months for everybody involved. As somebody who's not involved at all, I just appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm eager to see the plans and see some funding come in.
Thank you.
All right, Heidi.
Heidi Files with Kane County. Thank you. I have kind of a naive, still learning question, but I've only just started to be involved with this county safety action plan. And when we looked at our individual county draft online, and I haven't actually seen a copy of it, but just like through a presentation, we talked about, well, your slide says that project selections need to be part of the plan. Our consultant was indicating that if a project isn't in the plan, they can still apply for funding based on strategies. And that was my one concern, like if a municipality who hasn't been involved has a high accident location or a project, that they would be able to apply based on a strategy, a known strategy, or a concern. a
No, that's
systemic
an excellent
deficiency.
question. All of the counties are developing what is called the high injury network, where we have a high rate of fatal and serious injury crashes. And I believe that projects that address those networks will be of a higher priority. But we also, as I mentioned, there's a systemic analysis. So it might say, oh, it's very common that roads with this speed limit, X number of lanes, have a higher crash rate. If the communities have that condition, that might be able to say it's listed in the plan. And I say might, but I think it might not win, but it is eligible.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, Jack.
Jack, Illinois EPA. Is it your intent that CMAP would apply? Would it be the counties? What are you thinking at this point?
We believe it would be the counties or the municipalities or the counties. And I know there are some counties that have already expressed interest in this. And so we are looking to them to take the lead. We're going to pass the reins on working with the federal government.
Okay, yeah. I mean, would your work that you've done to this state though would kind of impact those applications, right? Would you be there to kind of assist the counties if they were wanting it?
Absolutely. And, one element that we were going to include in our regional engagement was to convene a regional steering committee that would help identify some quick wins, low-hanging fruit, and work towards implementation with a number of partners. And we hope that we would still be able to convene that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Amy.
This is just a meeting logistics issue. So Lindsay had put up there that the special MPO meeting would happen immediately after this meeting. Just bear in mind that is a Open Meetings Act meeting, so we won't be able to start that meeting until the posted time. So if we were to finish up, say at 11, we still won't be able to start until whatever we posted the time for. So just plan accordingly if you could, please. Thank you.
All right. Kyle, yes.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA. Will these plans include policy change recommendations at the regional level or the state level? I know the focus is on implementation projects, but what about those other policy barriers?
Yes, we did ask the consultants to review policy at all levels of government and how it might be impacting the ability to make improvements to safety. So for example, they'll look at the complete streets policies and, oh, it has exceptions for X, Y, and Z, maybe for resurfacing, and that should be changed if we want to see real change on the ground.
That's great. I look forward to seeing that.
All right. Amy?
Amy with Active Transportation Alliance. Thanks, Lindsay. You know how much I care about this. And Kyle keeps stealing my questions, but I have one more he didn't cover, which is in the existing safety conditions, is there a population level analysis in there? Or is that part of what you had to take out?
What do you mean by population level analysis?
We just know with crashes and fatalities, there's a disproportionate impact in certain communities. So just wondering what level of information will be in there that we could work with.
Yes, we do have that level of detail. We are calling them, I think, communities of concern and the areas that have disproportionate rates of traffic fatalities.
All right. Seeing none else. Thank you, Lindsay, for the update, and we'll see you probably back next month. So awesome. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 6.03. Kasha is here today to provide an update on the 2025 through 2026 advocacy agenda. Good morning, Kasha.
Good morning. It's my recollection that I covered our advocacy agenda at our last meeting, hopefully. Always happy to talk about it, but today I just have a couple of federal and state legislative updates for you all. On the federal front, so we are continuing to monitor executive orders and other federal directives for their impact to the region. Last month, we met with county engineers to hear more about local impacts of recent federal actions, primarily focusing on the USDOT directive requiring additional review of unobligated grant awards for their alignment with recent executive actions. Our understanding is that the total amount of unobligated awards subject to this review is in about the hundreds of millions of dollars range. And so, we're continuing to stay in close touch with our federal partners and our congressional delegation as more information becomes available, as more guidance is released and so forth. I think included in your packet is the most recent CMAP update summarizing some of what's happened recently. So feel free to take a look at that for more information. On surface transportation reauthorization, we are preparing for those conversations to ramp up quickly. We've already had some preliminary conversations with Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth's offices. Secretary Duffy testified before the Senate EPW committee and offered some insight into what USDOT is looking at in terms of priorities for reauthorization. I think this includes safety, permitting reform, and investing in innovation and technology. House T&I also recently opened up a stakeholder portal for comments on reauthorization. So we will be submitting some comments based on the One Regional Voice series of principles that we developed with many of you back in 2021. On that, I should note we are looking to kind of reinvigorate that effort for this most recent cycle. We're eager to facilitate a similar broader regional conversation to develop some principles for reauthorization. So I know we've already been in contact with some of you on this, so please stay tuned for more on that shortly. One last federal item for you all, just to note on member priority projects. So the House has recently opened up their process for collecting applications for community project funding. THUD requests specifically are due on May 23rd. Each member of our delegation is handling these requests a little bit differently, just because funding for FY25 requests was not included in the most recent continuing resolution. So some offices are not seeking new requests. They're prioritizing those FY25 requests. Others do have new applications open. We're just continuing to monitor this federal appropriations work as it impacts our work in the region here. Moving on to the state side, just a quick update for you all on our Strengthen Communities Initiative, which is House Bill 3784, and our effort to seek a $2 million appropriation from the General Assembly to grow our technical assistance offerings to transportation adjacent work. Erin had the opportunity to testify at the House Appropriations, Public Safety and Infrastructure Committee at a subject matter hearing that the committee held earlier this month. That's a really important milestone in the legislative process for that bill. Even though we don't expect this bill to move on its own, the goal is really to have this incorporated into the FY26 budget. It's just a good point to reach to have more legislative dialogue on that effort. So we will be continuing our engagement with the General Assembly on that bill. And just a quick note for everyone on where we're at in the legislative calendar. So both chambers are back in session next week. They'll be focused on hearing the opposite chambers bills and obviously in extensive FY26 budget conversations. And then lastly, of course, one major item the General Assembly is continuing to deliberate is transit funding and reform. I think since we had last convened, the House, Senate, and Transportation committees have both held some additional subject matter hearings on the two major reform bills that have been filed. We're continually monitoring these hearings and responding to legislative inquiries as they arise. As Amy noted, we've had a lot of interest from General Assembly members in having transit listening sessions in the region during these past 2 weeks when the General Assembly was not in session. So We had the opportunity to participate in sessions with Rep. Joyner in Westmont, Reps. Moeller and Ness in Algonquin, and Leader Gable, Rep. Gershowitz, and Senator Fine in Evanston. Our staff really delivered a Part 101 presentation, while legislators fielded questions and comments from constituents about transit improvements that they would like to see in their communities, and also just continued dialogue about transit reform happening in the General Assembly right now. So we're grateful for legislators for including us in that effort. I think that is all for me on the legislative front. Happy to take any questions you'll have.
Great. Thank you, Kasha. Any questions? Yes, Kyle.
Just one note on federal reauthorization. So our board is, this is Kyle Whitehead, RTA, by the way. Our board has directed us to develop a unified federal agenda with CTA, Metro, and PACE that will include reauthorization priorities. So that should be helpful in terms of putting together a regional principles list. So just letting everybody know.
Great. Anyone else? Awesome. Thank you, Kasha. Appreciate it. I just want to reiterate, Kasha mentioned this, but the memo and the packet, there's a lot of good information there too in some of these summaries, and it is online posted. So for those online, if you're looking to look into it a little bit more. All right, moving on to item 7.0, other business. Is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward today? All right, seeing none, moving on to item 8.0, public comment. Do we have anyone from the audience that wishes to address the committee today? Nothing in person. Okay. If you're online, please notify staff by using the raise the hand function, and then please wait for staff to identify you before addressing the committee. So, Garland, can you hear us today?
Yes, yes. How you doing? It's Garland Armstrong, formerly of Des Plaines and Elmwood Park, now living in Des Moines, Iowa. How's everybody doing in the Chicagoland area?
We're doing good. Weather's good, and I hope it's the same out there by you. It's been enjoyable. The last
Well,
couple
it was
days.
raining, but they said it's going to be nice here today and going into tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure if Lynette is still there. I was looking at for the Metro Heritage, since I just want Lynette to jump in on it, just to make sure, are you working with the PACE paratransit operations, like to make sure, like when some of the disability advocates coming from Springfield, getting off at Summit at Center Street in Hanover, are they going to put an address in there so the PACE paratransit operations can have it in their system, and then make sure on your timetable for time schedule for future references, because I'm still looking right here and there's no address on it for Summit at the intersection of Center Street and Hanover Avenue. So just want to make sure, when will that be ready, so y'all can make sure that I can tell my disability advocates there in the Chicagoland area, if some of them have to get off at Summit, and the paratransit will be waiting for them right there at the Summit train station in Summit. So just want to make sure when's the target date going to be, and what's the follow-up on it so far?
Hey, Garland, this is Eric over at PACE. I've reached out to Metro. We've cross-checked our addresses for PACE paratransit service, and that information should be available now. So if paratransit customers need to access stations along the Metro Heritage Corridor, we've confirmed that those addresses are in our system.
Okay, great. And also too, just want to make sure for the Amtrak, I know because we certainly need one for this. There's no Amtrak here, and I would have to go all the way down to Osceola. It's an hour drive from Des Moines to Osceola, but they said they've been talking about high-speed railing, but I hope one day you'll talk to Amtrak, see how they could get it, like if going from Chicago to Omaha and back which days. So I hope y'all can work on it and make sure you talk to the federal, state, and everybody getting involved and see it firsthand. So when will they be able to make sure to have one as a train depot in Des Moines and other stops there, so I don't have to travel an hour drive there? So I hope y'all talking to Amtrak about it too, and the federal, state, and everybody, and in different local communities too, and local government and everybody because it's, and I said, what's going on and what's holding up with it? Because they feel like they don't want to do nothing on it.
All right, thank you, Garland. Yeah, we jotted that down. We got that for the record, so we appreciate that comment. And we'll have some staff look into it. Any other questions or comments today?
Yeah, just for Kyle, Kyle, it's Garland Armstrong. When I see you Monday for the RTA Citizen Advisory Board, if I can't get you, I need to know what's the meeting ID and the passcode so I can listen in to you for this coming Monday for the Citizen Advisory Board, because when I go through it on my iPhone, they said they need the passcode, but just give me the meeting ID and the passcode so I can jump into it for this coming Monday, because sometimes I feel like when I call Michael Vandercreek, he doesn't know the passcode, but that's what my iPhone reads, the passcode to get in there for y'all.
Garland, this is Kyle. I will try to share as much information as I have about meeting access with you today via email.
Okay, you got my email address, and then you can text me my cell phone number. Ingrid got my cell phone number, so you can text me, because it's really important that I want to bring something up Monday. And also another friend of mine wants to jump in also too, because he doesn't even have how to get the meeting ID and the passcode. So that's all I want you to know.
All right, thanks, Garland. Anything else?
Yes, good morning. This is John Paul Jones from Wilbur Inglewood. Looking at the report today, I'm happy to hear the report from Create, because we had a conversation just recently with Alderman Teller and the Tuner Board about railroads, and it's good for that update to be provided today. We have so many projects over there that's been going on for so many years, and we just don't get enough feedback on the progress of them, because you see a lot of standstill activity over there oftentimes. But yet, as they reported, there were inflation costs, and of course there were some other kind of changes to the engineering and phases. So that was important information I can share with the committee back in Inglewood. Other thing is on the RCP, I noticed the difference between the fund impact versus the existing, well, the funding impact and then also the existing needs. And they didn't carry over. I'm concerned about them not carrying over the assets conditions, that these assets, we should always have an eye on the asset conditions. And I was curious why that was not carried over from the fund impact. Other thing is just waiting on these criterias. Again, that when you look at safety or you look at the assets, and even infield development, you would hope that they will carry over, because all three are very important to the future of the region. And I'm hoping they can get back to that subject matter at some later date. And then the other piece was on the safety side, when for the Safe Street review and the all safe streets for all for travel. When you look at the communities of concern, I'm hoping that they would possibly include members of the community to be part of that kind of regional steering committee, because as you indicated in the presentation that you had to suspend some initiatives under this Justice 40. So it will be important at least to provide a venue for people to exchange ideas, information pertaining to the Safe Streets initiatives, particularly because the city council is still working with communities, looking at how they can move ahead some safety and traffic legislation this year. And so the more we can stay close to the city council and the Cook County about how we move ahead with the Safe Street strategies, the better. I just want to share that with the committee today, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, John Paul. We appreciate the good comments, and you and Garland both have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for May 30th, 2025. And with that, seeing no other business in front of us, do I have a motion to adjourn? Jack, second. Heidi, all those in favor? Any opposed? Awesome. Motion carries. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you in a month.